the Majestical Huey of the Horton 229, Funny Mustache Man's quote-unquote stealth bomber. Because I love YouTube. I love YouTube ad guidelines. By LazerPig.
The door opened. Hitler gasped as the towering figure of Hermann Göring stood over him. You may be the Führer of Germany and the world, he purred, but tonight I am the man in charge.
Nice.
He began to peel the tight uniform from his body, revealing the surprisingly toned silk-skinned torso of a true Bavarian, gleaming in the scented candlelit room of the Berghof. Oh, mein Papa, the Führer whispered. The lust he had held deep within him now erupted like the flames over Poland. That was an extract from a Hitler Göring Gala fanfic. That exists, and don't you wish it didn't?
Still better than I heard 50 Shades of Grey. Still better than I've heard how that reads. You know what? At least there was character here. See this reading voice? This is why he was voted YouTube's sexiest pig. This just makes sense.
Is that important information to know?
Yes.
Yes. Don't interrupt. Good evening. My name is LazerPig. Historian, owl-breeder, mother of 12, man, presumably, and supreme leader of the world inside your head.
Yeah.
You watch this video at your own risk. There is a lot to explain, so I hope you are sitting comfortably on your expensive computer chair, sofa, or beanbag if that's how you choose to live your life. You're traveling with me on an adventure into a different dimension, through a door that leads to a world of historical drama where such petty, meaningless things such as facts and historical accuracy have typically held little sway over the denizens who dwell down here.
Okay.
From here on in, we dive into the quagmire of the Luftwaffe, an area of Second World War history so plagued with heroes of such a devotedly high caliber, many of them do not even realize they are one. And by opening yourself up to the knowledge held in this video, you may inadvertently find yourself becoming a target of their prepubescent aggression. I warn you, dear sir, madam, and or neither, from here on in, there is no turning back.
I'm ready.
You are about to enter the sweaty zone.
My God!
Still here? Good. Right. Let me set you the scene. The room is dark. Yet in the darkness you gain a sense of just how impressive a room it is. Golden chandeliers hang from the ceiling, great tapestries and paintings hang from every wall, and in one corner a vast, dark oak desk dominates the scene. Standing at this desk is the equally large and dominating figure of Hermann Göring, mentioned earlier, Minister in command of the Luftwaffe and Hitler's named successor. This is 1944. Göring has an impressive list of failures behind him, but he still commands respect, somehow, and still holds the ear of Adolf Hitler. But unlike his furiously defiant leader, Göring knows the war is not going well, and like Hitler, he clutches onto straws, desperate for some new wonder weapon to turn the tide of war. Göring has put out the call, and people everywhere are fighting for his attention, desperate for one of the highly prized government contracts that will feed them, provide shelter out of the many nightly bombed cities, and most importantly, keep them off the front lines. The reigning champion of this was Eugen Sonnier, who for 6 years managed to convince the German High Command to fund his idea for an orbital bomber plane, which was basically a plane he was going to stick a load of rockets on and fire down a train track. But it would work, provided they give him a lot of cash, a big staff of researchers, a fancy research laboratory, and most importantly, give him more stuff than his leading rival Werner von Braun, so he could give him and the rest of the Society for Space Travel, who thought his ideas were too stupid to ever work, the middle finger. And
look, all I'm saying, chat, if you too give me Activision Blizzard levels of money, and you give me a bigger studio than Call of Duty, and more employees on payroll than Call of Duty, I might be able to deliver you a AAA game. One singular AAA experience. When you take that out of the historical context and you apply it to literally anything else, it's great.
where was I? Right, so everyone who is smart and has a technical mind has pretty much figured out they can escape the horrors of war by, well, becoming a Nazi scientist. And out of all the generals and commanders Nazi Germany has left, Göring is the one with the power and the resources to make it happen. And with now things so desperate, there's very little he won't agree to.
What is that? Is that Miller, like the Miller Beer Company? Or is that a different Miller? Because the logo look, the font is what's throwing me off.
Many things have crossed his desk, from giant tanks and rocket fighters to laser guns and tornado cannons. Some have gone into production, but most are the work of fantasy, and none have yet given the Germans the technological edge they so desperately crave, though that tornado cannon was used in combat.
Okay.
Once.
Sure.
It missed. But now a new concept sits on Goring's desk, and it has potential. He reaches out and helps himself to another eclair, stuffing the chocolatey creamy delight into his face as his piggy eyes glaze over. The people in front of him, still living on civilian rations, starving as they watch Goring shove yet another eclair into his face hole. I've no idea if that's true. He's just very fat, you know.
Did you oh my god, he actually did that to his monitor. My brain had to actually understand what I was seeing. You absolute mad lad.
You don't get to that size on military rations by, shoving a few pork pies down your front. He picks up the plans, studying them carefully. A new type of plane. It had no tail, no propellers, no control surfaces. Its shape is bizarre, radical almost, and yet it can carry a ton of bombs over 600 miles and fly faster than any Allied plane known. This is the weapon that Goring has been looking for, and he eyes it greedily, much like the eclairs. This is the 229, the Horton Ho. Now, we have a lot to talk about when it comes to this particular aircraft, of which I will admit to being a bit of a fan of, which you can now fly for free in War Thunder.
No!
If you like to torture yourself by grinding for 4 years in a barely playable, unfinished game that constantly begs you for money. And I can say that because they don't sponsor me. Well, I probably ever will. So, if you...
You know what? That was a not ad read I could get behind. Put the mouse back in regular play, then we'll talk. Literally, as people are like, "Oh, Kip, play the game," they remove the mouse from actual standard. To which then it's justified because it kind of falls into this weird balancing tier. And I'm just like, we do realize that we make fun of AAA studios for FOMO like that. Like FOMO, that's not that bad. Like. If I got a sponsorship tomorrow and they're like, "Here, have a press account." No. I'm not doing the press account. If anything, because of how they've done their marketing with press accounts, any positive review using a press account, I immediately ignore it because that's not indicative of the final game.
Like occasional cutting remarks at just how shit the management team is behind War Thunder, you've subscribed to the right channel. The Horton Ho was the brainchild of two brothers. Well, the Horton brothers, obviously. Brothers Romer and Walter, who had approached Goring with their prototype glider, the Horton H9, something they had developed during Germany's pre-war glider club program. Gliders were Germany's way of bypassing the Treaty of Versailles, of testing new aviation designs, training pilots, discovering potential new pilots through civilian programs. Many of Germany's fighter aces would start life off as glider hobbyists. And if you don't know what the Treaty of Versailles is, imagine France tells you you're not allowed to do something. That's how you get Brexit Nazis. That's how you get Nazis. The Horton H9 was developed by the brothers as a way of testing the idea of a flying wing design, to see if it could create gliders with a vastly improved operational range. It didn't, Mike. Now, contrary to popular belief, flying wings were not a new concept and had been around since the 1920s after a number of swept-wing biplane prototypes by British inventor J.A. Dune. Dune. I'm going with Dune. Led to the Westland Hill Pterodactyl, which were a number of tailless flying wing prototypes, some of which are now appearing on the screen, that you will be able to see if you stop playing your game and listening to this in the background. And I don't care if you're too poor to afford 2 screens. You're going to minimize and look at these things. Too late, it's gone now. I mean, we waited for you, but you obviously had other things to do. This in turn was rivaled by Hugo Junkers, who was less interested in building fighter planes and glider concepts, and instead wanted to create an all-wing transatlantic passenger plane, which would eventually become the Junkers G-38, which still had a tail. And wasn't powered by rockets, which I'm very sad about. It wouldn't be till the 1936 Berlin Olympics that Russian designer Boris Ivanovich Sharanovsky, who had worked independently under Stalin, would show off one of the world's first functioning flying wing designs.
So that's actually a good point, because Berlin did host the Olympics. And I wonder if the Olympics got a black eye for that. I wonder if there was... because let's be real, right? People do things nowadays, and everyone has an opinion. Like... People, I guess, have been crusading against LazerPig or something, because I think he supported Ukraine or something like that, and that was just way too far for certain people. And I'm just like, it's a person's life. Can they not do what they want. Did I miss a memo here? So it makes me wonder if we had protests for the 1936 Berlin Olympics because, you know, like, sure, we weren't necessarily to the end game of the Third Reich, right? We weren't necessarily 38, 39, etc., right? But, I mean, it was still an authoritarian regime, was it not? Like, we can objectively say this, like, they were they were not the good guys. we can pretty say this, right? This is pretty reasonable to say across the board. See, I have to check though. I have to check in 2025 because, like, oh man, I don't know. It's so strange. Pretty sure they were the bad guys.
Competing in air races directly against the Horton H1 and the 9th glider competitions. Competing designs would also be featured by the now famed Ukraine designer Antonov, though these were merely considered motorized gliders and the Russians would do very little with the concept. The giant flying wing aircraft known as the Kanalan 7, which had previously dominated the early Russia strong meme scene of the late 90s and early 2000s, with its 16 engines and battleship cannons, is sadly a creation of early Photoshop.
Yo, when is War Thunder getting this? Okay, when are they getting this? Because they have what? They have the Doom Turtle, and they have, like, prototypes, right? And that's, I think, part of the controversy of the game. Like, they have, like, one-off things in the game. Where's this? Where's this in War Thunder?
And the actual plane was a hell of a lot more basic looking. I mean, it still looks fucking awesome. Kind of shit as a bomber, though. In fact, this is widely regarded as one of the worst planes ever built. But if you get a bunch of these information, it's impressive as all hell. If you wanted to see a real flying wing, then look no further than America, because the US has to do everything bigger and better than everybody else, obviously. Cheston L. Elshman, the most American man who ever lived, built the Elshman FW5, known more commonly as the Wing, and is frankly one of the weirdest things to ever take to the sky. But the other design, probably the more famed design by the one and only Jack Northrop, I'm not going to show you just yet. Let's get back to our little Horton and the primary reason for making this video. Flying wings are not unique, and this is not the first one to take to the skies, though it may be the world's first jet-powered one. And this is not the reason Hirabus, or Verabus if you want, and the like are obsessed with this machine. In fact, it's rather more complicated than that. See, if you take a good long look at the Horton, maybe tilt your head slightly, squint a bit, take a step back, further back, and maybe, just maybe, it kinda looks like a stealth bomber. And that theory might not be entirely mad. Certainly it is the right shape, and there are lots of little facts that fit neatly into this theory, giving credit to the idea that not only is the Horton potentially a stealth bomber, but it may have partially inspired the design of the B-2 Spirit. And I love the B-2 Spirit. I would make sweet, sweet love to that plane, if they would ever let me near one. Which is probably why they won't ever let me near one. So
look, all I'm saying, did we not have the whole Area 51 thing, okay? Party in front of Area 51? Look, all I'm saying, they can't stop all of us if we all try to touch the B-52 Spirit. They can't stop us all. For legal reasons, this is a joke. For legal reasons, do not do that. Do not assemble outside of military bases, and definitely do not try to enter military bases. For legal reasons.
If it's true, why make this video? Why bother to discredit anyone who believes it? Well, like all things in life, the facts are not as simple as you may understand them. If you're a hardcore fan of LazerPig, you may remember a very badly edited, hastily thrown together stream I did back on my birthday in December. You don't have to watch it, it's very, painful. But if you take anything from it, take from it two things. Firstly, the Second World War is such an overly complicated thing, spread out on such a vast scale, that the average mind becomes overwhelmed, and often it demands a simple explanation to sum up a very complicated situation. Terry Pratchett called this lies to children, by ways of oversimplifying complicated things to the point where a child can understand them, even if that simplification makes the fact wrong. His example being the way rainbows are made by raindrops splitting light.
Okay.
This is how light refraction works, but is not how rainbows are made.
Sure.
Technically. Well, it is and it isn't. It's got more to do with where you are standing relative to the sun, and anyway, so complicated.
So I think when we come to situations like that, it's not necessarily that it's wrong. I guess if you want to be Star Wars about it, it's true from a certain point of view. It's much like, how do I find a good concept here? I'm trying to find one out of thin air really quick. It's like if I were to tell you there was nothing redeemable about the Third Reich, right? No, let's twist this a little bit, because I still actually think that there is zero reason Mein Kampf as a book should exist. Hear me out on this. Should we look, to a generalized audience? I would say there's nothing redeemable about this book. There's no reason to read it, right? Pretty generalized statement. From a subjective point of view, one, to prevent censorship, two, to prevent history revisionism, and three, to make sure that we have the source information to cite from an academic standpoint. Yes, the book should still exist. The book should still be available. That is with the understanding that you're looking at from an academic standpoint, and you're trying to say, how did we get from Mein Kampf to the rise of the Workers' Party to the rise of the Third Reich? How we got camps, how we got, what led into the rise and fall of the Third Reich. From that standpoint, absolutely. So how this ties back into what was just said, right? Concept of refraction, yeah, from a certain point of view, yeah, that's absolutely true, right? Is it necessarily the full conversation? No, absolutely not. And I would argue that's why education exists. That's why, okay, so this is the concept. What do you mean this is wrong? Okay, let me go and research this really quick. Let me, in modern day, watch a video on this. Hey, I'll watch a couple videos on this. Does this corroborate what I've been seeing before, right? It's like how, like the concept of the Big Rip. We're almost done with this tangent. I'm sorry. The Big Rip in the universe. There's eventually dark matter, dark energy specifically, will just increase forever. And thus, eventually even fundamental particles will just rip apart, and there'll be an infinity between every single remaining particle, right? Like, sure, you can say that's how the universe ends, but that's not taking into account, thus watching more videos and researching the subject, right? That is one theory. We have the Big Rip, we have the Big Freeze, we have the inevitable heat death of the universe, right? We don't know if protons decay or not, right? And that's why we do research. So, sorry, longer tangent than I wanted to really go on, but I think that there's a generalized audience information that gets the right points, and then there's absolutely the educated perspective of, okay, like he's saying, that's technically true, but it's also technically not true because this is not how rainbows are made, right? That's a different conversation entirely.
It is the Second World War, and so ingrained into Western culture is the importance of the war that a lot of governments still propagate myths that overplay the importance of certain events or downplays the mistakes they made, and a lot of those myths are still taught to people in school or historical documentaries, even if they have been widely disproven. There is also the case of questionable sources, which can sometimes come from erroneous intelligence reports or after-action reports, which were typically dramatized or edited for propaganda reasons. And while that was more common for the Germans, with their propaganda division often reshooting apparent battle scenes if the lighting was wrong or if the commander's pose wasn't quite heroic enough, other nations, even on the Allied side, were not exactly being clean, with even a massive scandal erupting in the UK over the BBC's choice editing of what was going on. I mean, can you imagine the BBC lying to people?
No, definitely not. I know the BBC is a very, very forthwith organization. See, I say that, I don't know. There are going to be people who have a lot more opinions than I do.
And would that ever happen today?
You know what? I'm glad that he did this bit. I got a chuckle out of this. I love it.
And that's honestly just a tip of a very, very deep iceberg. To cut a long story short, you can't come up with any theory on World War II and you'd be guaranteed to find something that would back it up. Be that a random comment a general made or some scribble in a margin somewhere. And this is not helped by our second problem. As I pointed out in the Drunk Rant stream, what happened after the war is just as important as what happened during.
What? So top right, this rooster logo, who is that? What company is that? I feel like I've seen it before. I don't know if they still exist. I've seen them on a number of media. I'm assuming it was some kind of broadcasting group or some sort of media group. I have no idea who they are, though.
As after the war, you had a lot of German scientists and generals with nothing to really do. Not all of them were convicted of war crimes, either because they escaped or because they were genuinely innocent. But staying in Germany, these people would have faced a life of moderate poverty. Everything valuable had been looted, and what hadn't been looted had been blown to oblivion. But a new world was forming, one with America at the helm. And like a boomer at a strip club, the US was throwing a lot of money around. What happened next was a slurry of memoirs of various German commanders, often written by themselves, proclaiming that their fight against the Russians was unfair, that the Russians threw endless wave after wave of their own men till the Germans had ran out of bullets.
Wait. So you're telling me that's a very Soviet and or Russian thing to do? To just throw bodies at a problem until an outcome is eventually reached? And if the outcome hasn't been reached, you'll just throw more and more and more bodies at the problem regardless of the cost? Weird. It's almost like we have historical precedent for certain philosophies and military doctrine.
That supply issues and bad management on the upper echelons of the Nazi Party were responsible for Germany's defeats, and most importantly, not them. It's not my fault, they cry. It was Hitler for obsessing over Stalingrad. It was Alfred Rosenberg for turning Ukraine into slaves instead of allies. It was Goebbels for not releasing new tanks because he wanted to parade them through Berlin first. It was because we were fighting on multiple fronts. It was because of the rain, the mud, blah blah blah, etc, etc. Essentially trying to convey the message that had they had everything they needed, had they been given everything they demanded, they would have won. The unmitigated champion of this is Heinz Guderian, who, according to himself, pretty much invented German tank doctrine single-handedly. He didn't, but that's for a different video. Now, the reason they did this is because they wanted jobs in the new armies being formed by NATO in response to the rise of the USSR, and the scientists wanted the same. Many of them would go on to claim such ridiculous achievements such as that of Italian scientist Giuseppe Bellizio, who claimed that the Germans had been working on saucer-shaped aircraft, many of which had gone into space.
Right.
This formed the basis of the Nazi UFO myth in later years. Simply over-exaggerating claims or straight-up lying became the easy meal ticket of the German scientist. It guaranteed safe extradition to the US, a steady paycheck, and a comfortable laboratory in which they could experiment to their heart's content with little regard to if or not they actually achieved anything.
You know, I think that's interesting. I think that's it's a very human thing to do, don't get me wrong. But I think it's interesting coming out of the Third Reich, having the Nuremberg trials happen. And yeah, I mean, it's I guess you could kind of liken it to over embellishing your resume, right? Like if I were to go to, I don't know, John Employer right now, and it's like, well, what's this blank spot in your resume? I don't see that you've worked at any big firm, it looked like you worked in finance before. Were you just an investment banker? What's happening? It's, at the end of the day, I wanted to take a little bit to find myself, wanted to make sure that I was able to kind of reach a new audience, reach, new demographics that I hadn't previously. So I really just took up marketing for a few years, trying to understand how people work, how people tick, problem solve. Okay, that's a really fancy way of saying you did YouTube. It sounded flowery and pretty, but okay. Now, did I reach people? Did I reach new demographics? Or like that's the thing, right? Like, cool, you've said the thing. How much of it is true and how much of it has been fluffed up? So I think it's interesting to consider things like that and practices like that to things like this. And while we might have certain criticisms, the moment we turn it into a modern setting or a completely different setting entirely, right? Like fluffing up your resume, how our mentality kind of shifts, right? I think honesty, integrity, and accountability are all good traits to have for all intents and purposes. But we see here just people operate in different... They're selling themselves, regardless if they did it or not.
The US had already achieved its end goal, which was to keep the vast bulk of German technology and its inventors out of Russian hands.
Right.
Anything they did end up producing was simply considered a bonus. In fact, a lot of them weren't even taken seriously. Werner von Braun spent most of his time in America giving talks and speeches to rocket hobbyist groups in the US, up until the 1960s when he was finally hired by NASA. I'll do a separate video on him and his impact in the US space program at a later date because it is quite interesting. But anyway, knowing all of that, it's not hard to understand that a lot of German scientists would exaggerate their claims. The Hortons were among them. The Horton hull was captured as part of Operation Paperclip. the US's commando-style raid to liberate advanced Nazi technology and scientists before the Russians could get them, and naturally, they wanted to know what the fuck this thing was. Neither of the Horton brothers were successfully extradited to the US, as, contrary to popular belief, neither had really been part of the Horton Hope project. After fitting their glider design with jet engines, the prototype crashed, killing the test pilot, and the project was handed over to Gotthard Wabenfabrik, who designed the actual Horton we know today. The brothers, in an attempt to stay relevant and off the front lines, applied for Göring's America Bomber project, of which they were accepted. After the war, the brothers attempted to negotiate with the US and the UK. At the time, the UK was picking up every aircraft designer it could find, as it fully believed aircraft had played the most important role in the war. The UK had utterly dominated the aviation scene and was looking to capitalize.
I think this is interesting going into modern warfare as it stands. Not TM, not Activision Modern Warfare, right? But actual modern warfare as a concept in which we've seen drones used just in every major engagement, even minor engagements. Like, drones themselves play a major part in modern warfare. So I think it's interesting, much like the evolution of, say, bullets, rounds, etc., where we go from IDK, just throw nails or something in a blunderbuss, and then we kind of have more of like the standardized like musket ball. And I could be mixing up which one of those came first, and I do apologize if so. But then, the musket ball is not necessarily accurate enough. We have advancements later down the road, such as rifling, advancements from the musket ball becoming more conical, right? Like how warfare evolves, even from a firearm standpoint, going from World War I into World War II, right? We had rise of things like the Sturmgewehr. We had more, and apologize for the pronunciation, where we had more short carbines, right? We had smaller carbines throwing smaller projectiles down range, in stark contrast to more large round per minute, right? Something like the Sturmgewehr versus the M1 Garand, right? Where it's firing, I think it's 308. I definitely have that caliber wrong. But it's fascinating to watch this. So fascinating to watch tank warfare and going into submarine warfare and then seeing air superiority and going from air superiority into drone superiority at this point. I think it's fascinating to watch how this evolves.
However, neither the UK nor the US were interested in the Horton brothers, and this is where we start to see those claims. Rumar Horton, who later fled to Argentina, then attempted to sell his designs to China. This is where he made the claim that the Horton had been designed as a stealth plane, using a mixture of charcoal dust and glue to create a primitive anti-radar coating that would have helped it stay hidden in the specific radar frequencies the British were using.
Okay.
Now, if such a claim had merit, it was widely believed that the coating, combined with the general shape of the aircraft's cross-section, would have made it almost invisible to the British home chain radar system. And so the myth was born. Nazi stealth fighter, Nazi stealth bomber. This is a backward engineered Nazi stealth bomber. No one can convince me otherwise. Hitler had secret stealth tech. Entire Antarctica base invisible to naked eye because advanced Nazi stealth tech. And this bullshit persisted for quite some time.
Oh, History Channel.
Until, of course, some people from Grumman, the company who designed and built the B-2 Spirit, decided to test that claim. Because you see, until then, they had never heard of this fucking thing. They built a replica of the V3 Horton, the final design of the aircraft intended for mass production, and tested it within their RCS lab and found that, no, it was not a stealth bomber. While considerably more stealthy than most other German planes around at the time, the British radar systems had no problem picking it up, even when it tried to fly at low altitude. And of course, Grumman had made something of a technical error when building their prototype. It was made entirely out of wood. Now, wood does have some interesting radar-absorbing properties, which had intrigued the team, but wood alone does not a stealth fighter create, Mr. Sparks. And the actual design of the V3 Horton had steel tubes throughout the chassis, of which the wooden panels were bolted onto, meaning Grumman's replica was actually far more stealthy than the original V3. And to make matters worse, the last surviving model of the Horton was tested by the Smithsonian Institution.
I'm seeing this and I wonder how many people they make this and they're like, wait, our version's better than theirs. Wow, this is a crock of bullshit. Oh, I think that's my favorite part about this.
Who found no evidence of the charcoal glue known as carbon black. But Grumman themselves tested the compound and found that its radar-absorbing properties were, lacking, and would have had no impact on the aircraft's stealth claim. That should have put to bed this myth once and for all, but it has persisted as, once again, if you squint slightly, it does kind of look like a stealth bomber, so maybe, just maybe, even if Horton's design didn't work, then maybe Grumman took inspiration from its design and perfected it, because it does look like a stealth bomber. Doesn't it? Alright, remember that American flying wing by Jack Northrop I said I'd show you later? This is it here. This is the YB-35, flown in 1940, 4 years before the Horton, as he proposed prototype to a long-range bomber aircraft. The project was accepted, but was plagued by so many delays that by 1944 it was so behind schedule, the Army cancelled their order in favour of a more conventional design. The suggestion was put forward to equip the plane with jet engines, to which the Americans refused to take seriously, until a fact-finding mission to the UK to look at aircraft prototypes. That prototype being the Mosquito, which the Americans were considering purchasing at the time. The story goes that one American general leaned towards an observing British scientist and made the joke, "You know, some people say we should be investing in jet planes." To which the scientist turned and said, "You should. You want to see ours?" The plane he was shown was the Gloucester E-2839, a British prototype for a jet plane. Shortly afterwards, the Americans purchased several British jet designs and began experimenting with them. In 1947, 2 YB-35s were fitted with jets and flown as the YB-49. Now look at this, and Horton's design, and tell me which one you think looks more like a B-2 Spirit.
So I think this actually poses an interesting question, and I'm sure that there's conventions for this, right? So if you were to tomorrow, let's say, I don't know, develop plane competitor, right? Like fighter competitor, right? Or even stealth bomber competitor. And let's say, hypothetically, you came to, on your own, without any outside information, you came to the same conclusion, like you effectively made, say, the B-52 Spirit bomber, right? Could they legally go after you, even if it was proven that you just did this on your own? From what I do understand, that's how it works in media, where if something is copyrighted or patented, even if you have no understanding of what that is and you make the same exact product, or it's not legally distinct enough, from my understanding, they still can go after you, which does make me wonder as well, if you did somehow say, I don't know, in a cave with a box of scraps, make a B-52 stealth bomber, and, you know, you came to it on your own, like, which, implausible as that is, let's be honest, right? I wonder if the DoD goes after you. I wonder what the ramifications or repercussions for that is, even if you have nothing to do with the project.
Because the same company who built this in 1940 went on to build this in 1989. The Horton brothers and their jet-powered glider, though a fantastic and fascinating aircraft, had absolutely nothing to do with it. So if someone comes up to you and says the Nazis invented the stealth bomber, you now have just cause to beat their ass with a tire iron and scream, "No, they fucking didn't! Where did you get? Do you even know anything? What the?"
Yeah, exactly. Last Lord Thunderman.
Yeah, all I need to please me. And stimulate and tease me.
Amazing.
They won't leave at the night. I've no fear that they might desert me. Diamonds are forever.
YouTube's sexiest pig. I absolutely love that. It was a good video. I think there's definitely a romanticization of, like, romanticization, however you say that word. People look at Nazi tech, Nazi ideology in certain aspects with this weird romantic view, and I don't understand it. I don't understand it. Call me biased. Had a grandfather fight in World War II, you know, on the sides of the Allies, so call me biased, I guess, but I don't know. I think that if we're gonna, you know, people are gonna drink the Kool-Aid, like, oh, well, Nazi Germany made stealth tech and stealth bombers, and we can factually prove it wrong. I feel like that's a relevant smackdown, right? That's a relevant beatdown, because not here for history revisionism. That's kind of cringe, as the kids would say. I'm more of a fan of facts and figures, and, you know, if you didn't make any sort of, you know, contribution, if you had nothing to do with it, you shouldn't be rewarded, because you strictly didn't. But I love this video. This is awesome. Thank you, LazerPig, for an amazing video. The title itself sold me on it. I got edumacated, said it like that on purpose, and I thought it was a great video. So thank you for watching, everybody. Really do appreciate it. Hopefully you're having a good day. I'll see you in the next one.